Hey there and welcome. It's Tony here and welcome to episode 42 of the Dumb Leaders podcast. And what an episode we have for you. And of course, it's always thanks for tuning in. After our recent series of cognitive bias and how it affects dumb leaders, we've received some stories and some feedback from some of the people that some of our listeners, and thank you very much for that. It's always appreciated when we get some feedback. It's always awesome. And today I'm going to share a story that was provided to us by Matt from Blacktown in Sydney. Now Matt shares a story around his boss, and it's one that you may even be familiar with yourself, something around the vicinity. Now Matt said, "Hi, dumb leaders," and yeah, okay, thanks for calling us dumb leaders. We're trying to improve the lot of dumb leaders. So if anyone, when you do send feedback, just mention it to Tony and the gang, please. Now Matt tells us that his boss is a paranoid freak. His words. He spends just about all his time worried about what his boss is thinking. Especially of him. He spends so much time speaking to us about this and rallying for support. Now, he constantly tells us that if we don't do a great job, if we don't come together, that he will lose his job. So, and just, whether it's a guilt trip he's trying here, I'm not really sure, but we'll work through this. He shares that the boss is out to get him, and really, I'm over it. Why doesn't he just deal with his own issues? And we all have our own, Matt says. But he's also added that, we all have our own, but he's somehow added himself to our list of issues. How can we get him to stop? Now, first comment. There's obviously a bit of a guilt trip as well as paranoia happening, but we'll deal with the paranoia stuff and then we'll work through some ways that you can deal with this. But we've all probably had a boss or a leader that's shared too much. As we know, sharing is caring, but oversharing is just wrong. So, but when we think about paranoia, some of the stats and the research shows that many of us will have paranoid thoughts. Many of us will have a concept or a thought process around paranoia. Something like 65% of people have had at some times a thought or two of paranoia. But there are some surveys out there, and some would suggest 15%. Another one suggests that it's 1 in 4 adults will regularly have thoughts of paranoia. So that's like 1 in 4, that's 25% of people will regularly have these thoughts. The thought that someone is out to get them, the thought that the world is against them. And with those initial thoughts comes it increases things like assumptions and perceptions, and that actually makes this whole concept worse. And seriously, paranoid delusions can lead to psychotic disorders. It's proven to have relationships with schizophrenia and depression. So it really isn't something that can be taken lightly at all, because it is something that can lead to some pretty serious stuff. And if that is the case with yourself, please take some time and seek some help, because there are some ways that you can work through some of those thoughts. If you believe that within yourself paranoid delusions are taking over your life, please seek some help, because there are some ways that you can deal with that. However unlikely that may seem at the time. So paranoid thought processes occasionally can be seen amongst many of the population, but if left unchecked, can lead to some serious mental health issues. So it's a defining moment for many people. If we allow those thoughts to take control, you can be in some real serious trouble. But if you learn to cope with them and control them, you can ultimately maintain some semblance of control. And we'll talk about that in a sec. See, here's the thing. Often when we get consumed by thoughts that may be considered paranoia, what would others think? Why are they out to get me? The reality is often something has happened and it actually has nothing to do with you. So sometimes it's just sheer coincidence. Sometimes when people do things or are seen to do things that have an impact on you, it's not because they've set out, and I'm talking generally, often it's not because they've set out to do that to you, that maybe what's happened to yourself has just been an ill thought out consequence of what they have ultimately done. So when we are thinking, things like, what would others think of me, or that person's out to get me, often we are actually the furthest thing from that person's mind. So, and often that's the reality of the case. Often that is the reality. When we think that when we worry about what others think, when we ask ourselves the question, why did they do that to me? Often it's because, potentially they may not even know you exist. So that's the reality. And sometimes when we can bring our thoughts back into that reality scenario, we can start to deal with it. So often shit happens. And it's our ability to deal with the shit that enables us to move forward. But if we allow that shit to fester and become toxic, it can really hurt us. Hurt us badly. So hurt us really badly. So it's in our control and it's in our intention that we can learn to shift our own thoughts. In fact, one of the more effective methods of dealing with paranoia, and there's research that supports and backs this up, one of the better methodologies of dealing with paranoia and depression is mindfulness cognitive therapy. So we'll talk about that once again in just a second, what that can help and how that can potentially help you. It's also suggested that overthinking will often lead to paranoid thoughts. Having fears lead to paranoid thoughts. So in some cases it actually can be healthy. Sometimes you need to have a healthy mistrust of others. And we know that because of the amount of scams and stuff that are out there. People are actually trying to make money out of our own misfortune, make money out of our own misunderstanding, our own confusion. So it is good to have a healthy mistrust of some people and some deals. But what we need to do is just make sure that it's a healthy level of mistrust and not an overwhelming one where suddenly we're mistrusting everyone and that paranoia starts to set in. But it is healthy to have some level of paranoid thinking, and it's designed to keep us safe. So if you are one that has paranoid thoughts, the methods to deal with this, as what we're seeing in research, naturally is through mindfulness techniques, meditation, and through coping methodology like exercise, relaxation therapy, behaviour modifications. These are some of the key avenues in which people are dealing with paranoid thoughts, schizophrenia, depression. It's some of the better ways that people are learning to deal with some of this. Now, of course, there's medications. And of course there are therapy sessions that can help you deal, but people often will have a mistrust of chemistry and medication. So if you are believing that your paranoia or your paranoid thoughts are really starting to get maybe the better of you, start with mindfulness, start with exercise, start with those healthy methods of coping with our day-to-day lives, and you hopefully will see some real benefits starting to come through. Now, so that's a little bit about paranoia, but the problem that Matt's talking about also is about the boss sharing these thoughts. Now, oversharing as a leader is never a good thing. And when it can be destructive personally and professionally, makes it even harder. And paranoid thinking is something that can be destructive personally and professionally. Now, at the end of the day, we have all probably had a leader that has had some level of paranoid thoughts. I once had a leader who attempted to galvanize the troops with we've got to make our team bulletproof discussion. And he had good reason, because within a month he was gone. So we've probably all had a leader that had some level of paranoia. Now, paranoid leaders often come about through things like corporate politics, or when they're under pressure to perform. And ultimately the key is for us as the person that reports to this leader is to be able to define that for ourselves, regardless of how much I believe that corporate politics are poor, and they are destructive, and companies that can operate in a relatively free, because I will say relatively free, politically free zone, do perform better. But regardless of that, the reality is corporate politics exists, and that is what you have to be able to do, to read the environment. So if a leader is under pressure from a political aspect, hopefully your ability to read that situation will either enable you to work with that and understand the dynamics at play, and to be able to make the right decisions for you. But if a leader is under pressure on performance, once again, it's about understanding and reading the results and understanding the impact that that's going to have on you. So if under this scenario, I'll ask the question of how I can help. So whenever you are in a position and you've got a leader that's oversharing or becoming paranoid or talking about the pressure that they're under, ask the question of how can I help? And that's the best thing. That's the best thing for this particular situation. And once you have that, the answer to the question of how can I help, ask them for the trust to deliver it. If it's something within your scope of works, of course. And if it's not, maybe point them into the way that they need to be thinking and looking. Be respectful, but ask for that trust. And empathize with their situation, but insist on being allowed to deliver what it is that you can without the continual reinforcement, the continual micromanagement, the continual oversharing. And insist on it. But understand that your accountability is to deliver. Your accountability is to deliver. And if you deliver and be accountable, and your leader sees that, once again, most leaders will stop oversharing. Most leaders will stop micromanaging. Most leaders will stop the pressure cooker environment that they're feeling. If they can see that you're continually delivering to the standard that is required, that's going to reduce their level of stress and pressure, and that's going to, normally in most cases, will reduce that level of micromanagement and oversharing. Now, obviously, if you believe that it's something more serious, and we've talked about some of the mental health scenarios in relation to leaders that are paranoid, obviously, most companies have a process where you can alert others. Some companies provide counselling sessions, free counselling, etc., etc. We aren't trained to help someone that is allowing paranoia into and to bring some serious mental health issues into them. We're not trained. You're not trained. But most companies will have some service available. But once again, just be reminded that paranoia can lead to things that are personally and professionally destructive. So seek some advice, seek some support for yourself if you believe that it is becoming harmful and destructive to the manager. And if there is an option, please check it out. Matt, I hope that helps. I hope it's been beneficial to those other people and all our listeners out there that have been listening. Understanding how paranoia works, understanding that it can be healthy, understanding that we all have some paranoia thoughts every now and again. And that's what stops us falling for every scammer that's ringing us on the phone telling us to open our computer because they're from Microsoft. So a little bit of paranoia doesn't go astray. Just don't let it take over your life. Please check out dumbleaders.com. Once again, that's where the Dumb Leaders Handbook is. That's where we're sharing libraries of lessons from lousy leaders in the aim to make you a much better leader. Please like, share and review. Every single like, share and review helps us get found by someone else that can benefit from what it is that we're talking about. Thanks once again, as always, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.